Welcome to episode 4 of The Dirty Corner. This podcast is a platform where I discuss issues that I came up against and stories that I have from going to art school. I might talk about other stories from working as an artist as well. That was my initial intention, but this series has started to be quite a nice and expansive series, talking about, even though it's only episode 4, I can see the potential to really explore some of these stories about art school. So that's my intention at the moment, is to go through certain events that occurred when I was there, and whether it happened directly to me or to other people, or even just things that were kind of background for what the environment was like. That's what I'm going to try to do in this series. So yeah, let's get into it. This episode is called My Art is More Important Than Your Art. I take notes, so that's why I've got, I'm looking down here as I've got a pad here. It's only 3 bullet points, but just to keep me on track. When I first tried to record this podcast, I was a bit all over the place, and I'm trying to impose some structure now on how I speak. So I'm going to start with what I've called here expectations versus reality. When I joined art school, I wanted to get better at life drawing, learn perspective, learn art history, work alongside experienced artists, develop my painting skills, learn colour theory, things which I associate with art, fine art, ceramics and things like that. I was excited to kind of experiment and go a bit wild, but to also have a solid foundation of the fundamental skills that you should be learning as an artist. That was the expectation. The reality was that I was in a school which was more aligned with a kind of 70s beatnik, Dadaist inspired postmodern malaise. Because I don't think that it had any direction or any focus or any inspiration or any drive at all to inject into the students. Instead, it seemed to be kind of almost melancholic in its delivery of the course. There were a couple of tutors who were decent, and I mentioned those in previous episodes, and I'll quickly tell you who they were now. They had a painting tutor. He was cool. He would say certain ideas. He'd get us to practice techniques, which was good, and that was at the start, but it didn't last long because I don't think that was the curriculum. I think he was supposed to just do what the other tutors were doing, which is to present a PowerPoint presentation and then send us off to go and search for our own education, which is basically what a lot of them would do. The other tutor was a sculptor, and he started us off with perspective drawing, which I found quite fun, and he did a bit of art history, not officially, not in any kind of class about art history, but he was the only person who did us a lecture on art. Well, it was kind of architecture, but it was still the closest thing that we had to a lecture on art history. So I appreciate that very much. And he left in the start of the second year, actually. It was when the pandemic had hit and we went on to Zoom. No, it wasn't Zoom, it was Teams we were on. And he left soon after that. So that was the reality, was that we had one tutor left and then 3 other tutors, because the sculptor left and was replaced by a kind of sycophant of the other tutors. The kind of, there was a pompous tutor, and there was the dean's wife, who was she kind of gave off like this motherly character, but if you ever had any issues with any aspect of the course, she would go quite cold and distant, and you'd find yourself ostracized from a lot of the group opportunities and dynamics that would occur. So there were those 2 that were the dominant tutors, the painting tutor and this new little sycophant tutor, who was basically a suck-up of the pompous guy and the dean's wife. And that was something which really grated on me, because I would be relying on the painting tutor, and I think the burden on him was starting to be apparent, because I wasn't the only one who was craving some kind of decent education and feedback and human connection with some kind of faculty member there. Now, what I wanted was some kind of regularity to fundamental education. So one thing would be life drawing, or as they call it in other countries, figure drawing. In other words, a nude model, and we would go and draw them. Even if it were a clothed model, it wouldn't make a difference to me. So long as it's a regular, weekly class, once a week, I would be quite happy. It doesn't have to be mandatory. It could have been just additional, kind of almost extracurricular. But if they just hosted it so that I could attend and get ideas through that practice, but instead they didn't offer that at all, and I ended up paying for online life drawing sessions, which I still to this day attend once in a while. And hopefully on this channel at some point we'll feature the model and the organizer and manager of that online life drawing class, because I think she's a brilliant person, and she was a bit of a saviour for me, because I didn't have anything like that from uni. There was an opportunity at one point before the pandemic hit, and it was actually someone who was a bit of a problem, a bit of a bully in the school of other people, not of me. And at the time, I wasn't aware of how big a problem he was, but he was a problem. And he did me the favour once of, let me backtrack a little bit, because I'm kind of onto the next section here, which is campaigning for life drawing classes. So this kind of bully person, he was him, and he was a mature student. He was older than me, and there was a woman who was much older than me, probably one of the oldest in the studio, and she was a bit of a bully as well. She'd been unpleasant to me, but the bloke hadn't. He was kind of pally with me, I was fine with him. He was a bit boisterous, but I don't mind that. I don't mind someone who's a bit rowdy, a bit inappropriate at times, but I tried to engage him in that, to calm him down and be a bit more of a mature kind of influence on him if I could be, which may sound a bit arrogant for me to say, but I honestly was trying to create an environment that was friendly and welcoming to everyone. And to have someone who was just saying things that were overtly sexual or violent gave off a bit of an edge that I don't think we needed, when the majority of the people in the studio were 18 to 20-year-old young women. Anyway, so the point being, he was him and the older woman who I mentioned earlier were what were called the student representatives, which meant that this never happened, but they were supposed to get feedback from the studio, the students in the studio, and then feed it back to the tutors. I'd never had this with them. The one time was this occasion that I'm going to talk about, where he did me the favour of allowing me to take his place in this meeting, which was a place where you could give feedback to tutors and to a kind of committee of board members who oversaw how the course was running and how people are feeling about things. And there were two things that I wanted to talk about. One was to get life drawing classes available for students, and the other was to have additional counselling and therapy sessions for students who had experienced some kind of trauma, or who had kind of psychological, emotional issues and were struggling on the course, because I was friends with someone who had a lot of baggage which they were carrying, and I was trying to represent them as well in the meeting and say, can we offer this additional counselling to students who need it? So that was great of him to offer me that place. He said to me, you do a better job of asking for or making a case for life drawing than I could, because he knew that I'd done a lot of life drawing classes, and I was known in the studio as the person who drew a lot. So I appreciate that. I agreed with him. I could make a case, and I was in this meeting. I was keen, so I was up front. There was basically about 4 or 5 rows of chairs, kind of going forward, and about 4 or 5, maybe 6 deep. There were people sat in these rows, and I was on the front row. Kind of, very keen to listen to how the meeting was conducted and wait for my opportunity to speak. And it was basically getting feedback from the different representatives, and it was all, things are going well, we've had this, happen, which was great, the students loved this, that was great, this, that and the other, that was good. So I think I was the only person who, when I had the opportunity to ask anything, which they did say, is there any requests or any topics that anyone wants to raise, I raised my hand and was the first to talk and asked about life drawing classes. I made a case saying that I think it's the foundation of all drawing and maybe even all art making. If you were to make your fine art out of glass, to have a foundation of life drawing would only strengthen that, it would never detract from it. To learn things like negative space, horizontal and vertical markers, and the shoulder to hip ratio are things which are completely foreign to people in the studio and familiar to me, but they're always things which you can learn and grow from. And I'd really like the opportunity to have that as part of the course, because I think it would be very valuable and a great way for us to all connect and generate ideas. This went down well. I was even congratulated for making a good case, which I thought was very kind, very generous of them. And then I heard someone from behind me say, well, if we're going to have life drawing, then we should have creative writing. And I just kind of looked over my shoulder and was like, yeah, sure. No objection to creative writing. I just thought, what's this got to do with fine art? But that's what it was. It was someone saying, well, it's fine art. Why should we have life drawing? We should have creative writing. To me, that I don't know, at the time, I just went, yeah, I have no objection to other things. I'm making the case for this. Turns out the person who said that was someone who, how do I explain who they were? They were one of the returning students. So if you've seen episode 1, there were returning students, one of whom asked for my drawings. I gave them to this person. And when they returned them, I wasn't around and they were just scattered on the floor with footprints all over them. They were one of 2 returning students, and it was basically the other one who'd said, well, if we're going to have life drawing, then we should have creative writing. So they were both a bit unpleasant as far as my interactions with them. They were either disrespectful or negligent, So that was my experience there. And whatever, I'd made my case. I'd asked about therapy and counselling, which again was taken seriously with no objection because it didn't really come as part of the curriculum. It was more about students who've got trauma, so that wasn't challenged by any of the returning students or anyone else. And the meeting was adjourned. Went about my business. I thanked the person who allowed me to take their place and continued on with the course. The pandemic hit, we go on to Teams, there's still been no life drawing, and eventually at some point during the online sessions, it had gotten so bad that I'd just kind of fallen into this slump of depression, of I really have no faith or interest in the course. The way that they were delivering the course materials were horrible. Really bad things had happened already, where certain things that I'm going to talk about in different episodes had really affected me emotionally and mentally, where I thought, I'm really trying to make the course, kind of not be tarnished by a certain event, and for some reason they weren't taking it seriously, so it became just a weight that I was carrying, basically. So during these meetings on Teams, I would start to turn off my camera. I wouldn't want to be seen anymore. Really, checked out. I would listen to all the meetings, I'd be there, and I wouldn't interact or engage with anyone, and then I would listen to the meetings afterwards. I'd download them so that I had them to watch and rewatch. And they were just hard to get through. I wish I could play them for you because they were slow, they were annoying, they were unproductive, they weren't creative, they didn't add anything to either your education or to anyone's kind of knowledge in any way or experience in any way. It was just the tutors had made friends with some of the students. It turned into a bit of a social club for them. I say the tutors, I mean the dean's wife, and the little wormy sycophant guy. He was pretty bad for that as well, where he tried to be friends with some of the students. Whereas the painting tutor was cool. He'd come in, he'd make sure there was no messing about. We'd have some kind of a talk or some kind of input from him in some way. And then the pompous tutor would try to run certain things where he'd say to us to go and educate ourselves, which I got really fed up with. Instead of them saying, today I'm going to talk about why we think Marcel Duchamp is so great, because they thought Marcel Duchamp was so great. Instead of that, it was just, you pick something, you research it, then you present that you've picked something and researched it, and that's what we'll mark. And that's what happened over and over again. And I just wanted them to say, we've got something we've researched and we're going to talk to you about it. We want you to take notes, ask questions, engage with the subject, learn something together, and then we'll all have that as a shared growth on the course. And there wasn't that. And I was really disappointed about that. I'd go out and, look for things. I mean, it's weird because they did certain things, like they'd say, we want you to do, what was it? It was a cabinet or something like that. Do something based on a cabinet. And they said it can be whatever it is, whatever you want, inside the cabinet, but we want you to basically make your own cabinet because that's what this artist has done. Which is fine, and that's at least something to do. But it wasn't very informative or inspiring the way they present it. And I did that, and I did my best with it. And if I can find the footage, I'll play the footage over this video, because I did take the time to, it wasn't a cabinet necessarily, but I got, a few shelves, and I arranged certain things purposely to have a narrative that I felt I could explain if I was asked. And then I used layers in order to have the cabinet in front of moving images behind it. The first thing I think I tried was a fish tank, and the second thing that I tried was me driving on the road, and both of which I thought could be used to give context to the different items on the shelves and the narrative I was trying to convey. This was never expanded upon or discussed or marked or anything. It just felt like we'd done it for nothing, just to pass time. Annoying, again annoying, but that was part of the education. And because certain things had happened that I'm going to discuss, certain big things had happened on the course, and I'd then started to try and make sure they didn't happen again, I'd become a bit unpopular in the studio, because I'd sort of pointed something out and said, this really isn't fair, this isn't good. Someone's left the whole school, not just the studio, but so has left the school and gone somewhere else because of this specific unpleasant event that occurred. And a lot of people just wanted to turn a blind eye and ignore it. And people who didn't want to ignore it and wanted to help, they were targeted as well. That's something which I'm definitely going to cover in detail in an episode soon. I don't know when, but soon. This is the last episode that I've planned, to be honest. I've got 4 episodes planned out with 3 bullet points, and this is the 4th episode, and that's the last one that I've planned out. Anyway, during this time of being on Teams and having my camera switched off and being annoyed by how pally the bullies were with the tutors, it'd be things like someone would ask a question of a tutor, and instead of the tutor answering, one of the bullies would answer, saying, "Oh, so-and-so told me that she'll be doing this on such a day, and she'll be doing this, next week." So it was weird. It was weird to kind of think, I can't now interact with the tutor because they can't be bothered doing it, and they'd have excuses why. And they'd say, "Oh, you've got to tag my name if you want me to interact with you," which sounds fair enough. But then if you looked at when the bullies sent a message for her, it wasn't tagging their name, and she'd interact with them. So I think it was nonsense. I don't think there was any actual truth behind that. It was just favouritism, and I got fed up with it. And during this time of lockdown and stress and unpleasantness, they decided to put on a life drawing class, which was, a bit late, and it was definitely too little, and I'll explain why. This may sound strange, but life drawing classes, if you're going to advertise a life drawing class, you put up drawings. It doesn't have to be showing nudity, but it shows the drawing, different styles of drawing. It can be loose and expressive and abstract or whatever, or, classical. But it's whatever it is, it's some kind of drawing to get people thinking, yeah, this is artistic, let's do it. And it'll say life drawing classes, Tuesdays, 3 p.m. on Teams, hosted by, let's just say Sophie. I've no idea. Sophie's not a name of an actual person that I'm thinking of. I'm just making up a name, Sophie's hosting this life drawing Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. Whatever, that would be the advert with a bit of a drawing. They didn't do that. They did a post where it said that someone was going to be doing life drawing. It didn't have any drawing or any information about who she was. It said the time and the day, but it didn't really say any information aside from that. So I looked up on Instagram this person's name, and I found that it was a student, another returning student, not one of the 2 problem students, but another student who I didn't really know. And looking at their Instagram account, they shouldn't have been teaching life drawing. They've maybe been to a life drawing class, by the looks of it, maybe been to one. But probably been to one, I should say. I think there was some life drawing on their account. It wasn't experienced work. And I don't want to sound harsh, I'm not exactly amazing myself, but looking at their work, I thought this isn't the person you should have running or hosting a class, because you need someone who knows poses, who knows how to talk to models, who knows how to help any students who might need help, just someone with a bit of experience. And that wasn't this person. I didn't end up going to this class because I just thought I've got no interest now. They've not done this right. Typical of this school to do it wrong, do too little, too late. I don't care. I'm the one person who campaigned for life drawing. I asked for it over and over again. I went to a proper meeting and specifically made a case for it. And now they're doing it. I don't want it. I don't want to go there. It's going to kill me to see how poorly it's run. I don't want to do it. Thankfully, a couple of people who I was friends with went, and this is what they told me that happened. For anyone who doesn't know what life drawing is like, when you go to a class, you have a group of people. They usually have easels, drawing boards, chairs, things like that, art materials to use. Because this was online, you provide that yourself. I've done online life drawing classes, so you have that. So what usually happens is the person who's running the class will talk to the class and say, right, how's everyone doing? You doing well? You know what's going on at the moment? I'm going to be, let's say they're not the model, because I've been to one where it's the model, but we'll say, I'm going to have a model come in and we're going to start off with a pose that's only going to be short. So we're going to do 5 minutes first, And then once we've done that, we're going to have longer poses and go throughout different lengths of poses. And I'll tell you how long it's for. If you've got anything that you want to request specifically, we can do that. But otherwise, there's certain poses that we've discussed and arranged that we're going to do for you. That's normally what would happen. This apparently had none of that. Instead, the person running it was only fairly young, didn't really know what to do or what to say, wasn't especially forthcoming in hosting, asked the attendees for suggestions. No one who attended knew what they were doing, really. Anyone who didn't feel like running the class, so they just thought, I'll just leave them to do it. And they had a model come in. The model had a dog with them, and they also said that you don't have to undress if you don't want, so they kind of draped their clothes over their shoulders and they were being drawn from the back. This is all kind of forgivable except for the dog, that you can't have a dog at a life drawing class. And then one of the bullies said, I want the dog there with the model. Now, anyone who's been to life drawing should be laughing now, because there's no way when you're drawing a model that you want a dog there as well. This is life drawing. You don't want additional complications like that. For warming up, for your first pose, you don't want any kind of craziness to happen. You want it to be easy, warm up poses, let's get loose before we start getting to more complicated poses and try to learn something. But it sounded like it was aimless and lacking in any kind of structure, which is kind of aimless, throughout. The model actually insisted on disrobing because that's what they'd been paid to do, even though the host said that they don't have to, which is weird for a life drawing class. It's fine if it's portrait drawing, but to actually have life drawing, where that's the point, is you're drawing a nude model, to be so kind of funny about it seems like there was no decent arrangement for what was going to happen. For me, it would have killed me to be there. I would have spoken up and said, this is not right, this is not how you do this. And it would have been awkward, but that's who I am, and I'm glad I didn't go. So the people who did go said that they enjoyed it because it was drawing, but they thought it was weird and poorly ran. And that was the only life drawing class that was put on and offered to us. Throughout 3 years that I'd been there, 3 years, one life drawing class. I'm glad I skipped it. And I really wanted to go to life drawing, but I was paying to do life drawing at least once a week, I think some points twice a week, because I needed that kind of education. It's basically a who wants what from the course. I wanted something which was diverse in its structure, actually had something to offer. Let's say it was, we're not doing life drawing. What we're going to do instead is we're going to have performance classes where we're going to have a host and we're going to ask people to attend and perform. And even though it's over a camera, we're going to say, if you can turn your cameras on and do a bit of a performance with us, we're going to go through how performance art works. I would have attended that because they were offering something. They didn't offer it. And I'm not a big performance artist person at all, but there was none of any of it. There was no performance or anything. There was no kind of, let's make kind of Dada artwork or anything like that. There was nothing. It was just sort of, you think of something, you do it. And I was fed up with that. That was the problem that I had. I didn't want to go to things like that, where it was, I'll just say half-hearted attempt at doing any kind of art event or occasion or, class. I've said this before, but the tutors could have said, we don't know what to do with this, can you put something on? Not just to me, they could have said that to, I reckon I could pick at least 5 students who could do that, aside from me, to put things on for everyone to do and say, we just need half an hour, maybe an hour of some kind of event, have a break in the middle, but if you can cover something that you're interested in that everyone can engage with, that'd be great. I know at least 5 students in the studio who could have done that. Whereas the tutors never did it, and the returning students didn't do it because they didn't have a decent education. I don't think they understand art history, art practices. Everything which they did was just fell apart. It was rubbish. So that was the calamitous attempt at having life drawing introduced to my fine art course. One class once. And like I said, I didn't even attend. So what a mess. But that's it. That is, my art is more important than your art. The reason I've called it that is because it seemed to me that their art, or their preference for art, was more important than not just mine, but there was a lot of people who said I'd like a fundamentals course. When the sculpting tutor helped us do perspective, that was welcomed and enjoyed, and I think more people would have appreciated the opportunity to go to things like that. It wouldn't have to be, you have to go, but if we had the opportunity to have those things available, I think people would have gone and got a lot out of it. But it wasn't their art. It was my art. It was mine and several other students' type of art. So that's why I said I think they were thinking my art is more important than your art. So that's this episode. I've said this before, certain episodes I'm going to put a warning at the start of, and I've started hinting at bad things that happen in the school. So coming soon will be some more severe stories of bullying and harassment and assault. So I will put warnings at the starts of those episodes. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you next week.